Hello, everyone. I just want to check I am live because I'm running a little bit late. So give me one moment before because I've talked before and nobody's been here and it hasn't been working. So I want to make sure it works this time. So as you can see, I'm at home today. I've changed my view a bit. So if you've seen me do this from home before, you'll notice I normally have these cupboards, whereas I've moved it around because we have an exciting announcement hopefully next week. We're just waiting to sign some contracts on a potentially new location. So just trying to get that ready. Am I live? Can you see me? Yes, I am. Perfect. Okay. So can just run through some of the stuff that's been going on this week. So the big thing is in 2 days' time, we have our event at Barclays Rise. I think there's about 86, 87 people signed up so far. You need to sign up by the end of tomorrow because you need to give that list to security. But that event has a panel which is all about financial inclusion in tech. So we'll have Nina Mohanty, the founder of Bloom Money, and that's a saving club's all about people who've been immigrated to this country and helping them with their finances. So it's a fintech company that's already raised over 1 million, and they're doing incredible work for people. We've got Control Alt, so that's Matt Ong. So they're actually based in Barclays Rise, and I'm a angel investor in Matt Ong and Control Alt. And what they do is enable people of all different backgrounds to be able to invest in alternative investments at an accessible price point, right? Because let's say you want to invest in property. Do you have 100K lying around? I don't. So that's what we're trying to solve there and make that easier, more accessible. And then on the investor side, we have Nitya Gupta, who's an investor with Element Ventures, and they focus on fintech. So she's an expert. She sees so many pitch decks all the time and works with a bunch of different organizations to help them to fulfill their potential. So that's our exciting event coming up soon. So it's literally on Wednesday. So come along, meet me in person. It'd be great to see some of you guys there. It's always interesting to see who turns up. We have, I think it's about even split. So there's about, I want to say 70-30. So there's quite a lot of investors coming along. So if you're looking for investment right now, it's a great place to go to. And what you should also think about too is it's a great place to meet other founders because it can be quite a lonely journey. So come along on Wednesday. I'll put the link in the comments. Let me just grab it. So the link is here. So if you want to come along on Wednesday, completely free, then it'd be great to see you and make sure you say hi as well. I don't bite too much. Then what else has been happening? So obviously we've got that event coming up. We have Gervir has now gone on holiday again. So some of you might have known that I was on holiday for a week, taking a bit of a break. I've come back. Me and Gervir worked together for a week. And then now he's going away for his honeymoon. Well, not honeymoon, his anniversary for his marriage. So he's taking a bit of a break right now. And I'm running the ship again. So what's kind of working out quite oddly here. So some of you might have been following. So I'm one of the co-founders. My co-founder is Gervir. He had a day job for about the last 6 months or so. He left that just as I left for Berlin. I got back from Berlin. 5 days later, he's gone on holiday again. I think from about November the 13th, we're both back together again. And that's where we can really start pushing things again because anybody who's run a startup knows it's quite difficult to manage all the different things happening. And we had a good talk last Thursday, which I can let you know some insights here from you listening about how we make this sustainable. How do we make this like really scale? And part of it is of both of us working more consistent hours, right? So it becomes like 9 to 6 or whatever it is. And off the back of that, we can really be more predictable. And I think that predictability and that layer of now, this is what we're doing when, can really help us to grow. Because one of the challenges, especially in the last couple of months, it's been a good challenge, is that we've had just had so much interest from different people. And what can happen is when you have so much interest, then people that we should be speaking to just slip through the cracks. And it's not because we don't value them, it's not because they're not important. It's just because there's so much going on where it's easy for us to lose track of people or to think, oh, I've replied or Gervir's replied, and neither of us have. So that's one of the things we're working on there to try and make sure that we have that access to different people. So I should also post this on Instagram to let people know that we're here. And One of the things you might have noticed as well, my camera is very bad today. It's because my phone is basically broken on me. So I've been being cheap and I haven't got my new phone yet. And my phone was already on its last legs. And because I was cheap and because I delayed it, then I wasn't muted that entire time, I hope. So we'll find out there. Was I muted the entire time? If you're watching this, let me know if I was muted or if you could hear me. That would be much appreciated. If not, I'll just continue. So I'm just posting this on Instagram at the moment, taking my phone off charge for a few seconds just so I can reply. So let's have a look. Let's put this here. Okay, that's good. Ah, good to see you. So let me give Jay a little shout out. So Jay is somebody who's very young, but he's been able to do very well for himself with quite difficult circumstances. So he's also a great goalkeeper. I think he's injured at the moment, so he's come to play with us with the AHQ football games we've been doing. So how are you doing, Jay? Any questions you got for me? So I'm literally just posting this on Instagram because often people join once I've posted it there. Join 12 to 1. Okay. So posting link. Join 12 to 1. Okay. Okay. So as I was saying there, so big thing we've got coming up this week is Barclays Rise. So make sure you come along. It's targeted at inclusion in finance, and I guess I can explain a bit more about what that means. So one of the challenges for people from different backgrounds is often access to finance and money. So if you can't have access to those things, and it's very difficult to then to build wealth and to obviously bring yourself into a more comfortable financial position. And what different startups are trying to do is really tackle that issue head on and give people those opportunities. Because one of the classic things, for example, is let's say you have moved from another country and you need to open a bank account. But in order to open a bank account, you need to have an address. And to have an address, you need to have a bank account. So there can be these different problems that come up. And often, if you've just moved here, you don't really know all of the different schemes, things you can take advantage of. For example, like if you grew up here, even if you grew up here, you might not know what an ISA is. But an ISA is the best way for many people to invest. But if you're not aware of that and you've just moved to this country, how are you supposed to figure that out? And there's things like that. There's also a case of often there's quite high barriers to entry in order to invest. So let's say you have to have a minimum of 100K to invest in a certain thing. Even for example, angel investing, a lot of people say 25K minimum checks. Now that means that people from different backgrounds who don't have that kind of money lose access to that. So what fintech is trying to do is to open up those doors a bit more. And let's say another big thing that's happening in fintech in terms of inclusion is when you look at, say, assist like financial advice. Typically, you've had to pay somebody to be a financial advisor, whereas now there are different options such as AI and other ways that just give you that education, which can help you to thrive financially. So that's the reason why we picked financial inclusion to be a topic, because for many people, they're locked out of some of these opportunities. I can also quickly mention, so let me go through the newsletter and some of the things that have happened this week. So bear with me one moment. So let me find it. It is So here's some of the other events going on this week, not from the Bay HQ. So FinTech Connect has got a launch event, also at Barclays Rise, where our event's going to be on Wednesday. On Monday between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. The Open Source Club has an event at the same time, so 7 till 9. The Proud Summit have a day of workshops on Tuesday. Coding meetups for staff, for founders and coder applicants is happening on Tuesday evening. Dev Drinks, so a way to meet software developers. That's also a very good thing. So let's say you're a founder who's got an idea, but you don't know how to code. It's good to go to some of the events which are actually aimed at software engineers, because then you can get a good idea of the way they work and their mentality, so that it's better for you in order to pick the right people to work with. There's an event from Seed Legals, which is about expanding to the US and the 12 essentials you need to know. That's online. There's a Hatch Learns event, which is about creating a website that converts. A scale-up event, Europe, which is a roundtables for leaders in scale-ups, and that's happening on Thursday. So I've got a question here from Jay. Do you have any advice on balancing a 9-to-5 job and starting a business without jeopardizing financial security and fearing the potential leap to self-employment? So a huge part of this is what I say is always start with the smallest possible thing. So when you look at starting a business, when you've got the 9-to-5 job, so obviously, hopefully the 9-to-5 job gives you that financial security. And for many people, you can keep that job for as long as possible. So I initially started writing and I didn't expect to take it full time, but I was doing it for 15 months together before I quit my job. So it's quite a significant amount of time. And what happens if you've got a 9-to-5 job and you've got a business on the side? There's other sacrifices that come into that, right? Whether that's family time, whether it's time with your friends, whether it's leisure time. And it's also being quite aware of those sacrifices and what you're willing to make, because it could be a case that actually that's not the right thing for you at this point in time. And what I'd say is a lot of it comes down to planning of, okay, what exactly do you want to do? And work out different milestones and how long you think it's going to take you to do it, and then double it. Because almost certainly everyone has this enthusiasm at the beginning of how quickly you can get things done, and it usually always takes longer than you think it's going to take. So let's say you think you've got, with your day job, you've maybe got 20 hours in a month to work on your side hustle, your business. Now think about what can you get done in those 20 hours, and what's the best things in terms of stability to do that. So often the best thing to do at the beginning is just do research. So don't actually think about the business itself. Think about doing the research, understanding if there's a problem they're actually solving, whether or not that's something which is there's demand for it. Set up the MVP of like, okay, this is my idea. Is it worth me doing? Because you can learn a lot before even launching the business if you do the research correctly. And that could be surveying people. It could be going to different events which are in the industry and getting people's opinions. But there's a lot of people who maybe consider starting things in secret. And actually, in many cases, it's actually better to get the idea out there, see what the feedback is. If nobody seems to think that your idea has any value, or there's nobody who's like, oh yeah, I'd pay for that, then you've got a problem there. And it's good to find that out early as opposed to late. So first thing I'd say is I do a research phase. Maybe you spend a month on that, right? Of just getting the idea together, getting all of the pain points, right? Because remember, any business is really about solving a pain point. So work out the pain points, work out if it's a hair on fire problem, work out how much people are willing to pay to solve that problem, and then go from there. And if you then do that research and think, yes, this is something I want to pursue, then first thing you should say, for example, incorporating, which you can now do, I'd say advise Tide. So Tide Bank, and I'm not sponsored to say this, it lets you set up an account really easy and also create a company in Companies House at the same time. So that's quite a good way of just starting out. And also at the beginning, it's working out what's the arrangement with your company, because your company might have a problem with starting a company, and you've got to be very careful about that and how you go about things. And then without jeopardizing financial security, I'd say the big thing at the beginning is for most people, I quit my job once I was financially secure enough to do so. And even then there can be struggles at times, right? But you've got to decide for yourself, what's that level that you're comfortable with? And it also depends on if you've got children, if you've got dependents, all of that kind of stuff. But that number is very personal to you. So sometimes people say, oh, when you're making 2/3 of your income, or when you're making this amount. But it really depends on your specific circumstances, because some people can quit their jobs and they can live at home and have no expenses at all. And if that's the case, then they can take a risk a lot easier. With other people, they don't have that luxury, or they need to help out with their family's personal finances. So it's really working out of like, what is that stable amount? What's the amount? For example, if you gave yourself a year, or a lot of people say 6 months, but it all depends on your risk appetite. But how much money do you need if you don't earn anything at all from your business to survive for 6 months or a year? And I personally am more risk averse than that, right? I wouldn't want to take such a big risk and have that looming over me when I'm working. But it really depends on your specific circumstances. And I think a key thing to do as well is just have like specific amount of hours you're going to do each week and plan that out each week. Okay, this week, this is what I'm going to attempt to do. And what you'll probably find, and what I found, is you're likely to not actually get done what you thought you were going to do. But it's always having some kind of a plan of like, okay, here's what I can try to do this week, and then reassessing each week. That's what I kind of advise in terms of how to balance it with a 9 to 5. And it's really working out a big part is like, what are you willing to sacrifice? And I don't subscribe to hustle culture, right? Like, it's all about what makes sense for you and what makes you happy and makes you fulfilled in that way. Because a lot of people will say, "Oh yeah, you just sacrifice going to people's birthday parties and sacrifice family events." It's like, that's part of what life is. Life is about some of that stuff, and you shouldn't be missing out on things that are going to make you happy just to impress somebody else. So it's really working that out. So hopefully that's helpful. Let me know if you've got any follow-up questions to that. Okay, I'm just seeing some emails come through. Yeah, and like, so I think Jay's made a good point there as well. So saying he's taking football more seriously, and it is really like, one of the things I've done in the last year, which has been really bad, and which I need to fix myself, is that I've really abandoned a lot of my hobbies and stuff I just do for fun. And by doing that, it over time it will decrease my like mental ability or make me burn out. So it's really important to actually say like, it's more important for me to play football or to do something which is like keeps me balanced, keeps me focused, keeps me in a good state of mind, than to just work out how do I make as much money as possible. And it really depends on like your situation. So I think it's good to prioritize that stuff, because for me, what I've realized as well is that my work is never ending. I can always try to make more time and carve out more time, be more productive. I'm never going to be able to answer everybody's emails. I'm never going to be able to reply to everybody. So I need to look after myself, because then the emails I do reply to, the people I do reply to, I'm more present and in a better state of mind. Whereas I've allowed myself to be quite overwhelmed this year. And by doing that, it actually means that I turn up less for the people I do reply to and the people that in my life. So that's something I think is very important, is how to keep that balance and making sure you're doing things that are keeping you in a good state of mind. Okay, any more questions, anybody? Okay, let me carry on going through some of the newsletter stuff in the meantime. So I mentioned about some of the events on this week. Here are some of the open job opportunities as well. Another one I just saw from somebody I had a call with is that Now to Vow is also hiring a social media intern. So if anybody's looking to get involved in the startup space and get that experience, working at a startup is a good way of getting that. And you have a little bit less risk. You obviously have some risk because these startups may have to cut employees or anything like that. But it's a good way to get some of the learning experience of what it's like to run a company by working closely with people who are running companies. So let me just run through some of these opportunities. Desi City are hiring a digital and social content manager. Amalia are hiring a social and media marketing manager. Block Dojo are hiring an early stage founder and a CEO at Startup Venture. Odin are hiring a customer success manager and a growth marketing manager. Nala are hiring a head of finance, a head of people and talent, and a treasury and FX manager. Hived are hiring back-end engineer, customer experience manager, finance and accounts trainee, head of capacity and planning, payroll administrator, people operations officer, and a junior back-end engineer. Click are hiring a business development manager. AutoGen AI are hiring a lead developer, a senior developer, a user coach, and a user coach bid writing professional. And then CHR Life Sciences are hiring a recruitment consultant. So that's the jobs available. I've done the events. I'll talk about the podcast from last week as well. So we actually had our first unicorn founder. So if those of you don't know, a unicorn is a $1 billion startup. So that was Hussein Kasai. So Hussein founded it on Vido. If you've ever made a bank account, if you've ever had to get your details checked, you've probably used Onfido. So you know where you have to like put your face into the camera and it checks your angles and sees that. They built that. So what it means is that it's a way to really check the security and make sure things are airtight. And it's used by banks, it's used by airports, it's used by all different kinds of people. So he founded that. And he talks about the difficulty of doing that because he started it while he was an undergrad and then continued. And for the first 3 years, it went nowhere. There's all this pressure. He didn't know if he was going to be able to pay people. And then it grew like massively, right? So now they've got like hundreds and hundreds of employees. They've got massive, massive clients. So off the back of that, he then stepped away and now he runs Quench AI. Quench AI has raised 5 million itself, and it's a platform for content creators to access large corporates. To what they can do there is, if the corporate training, often it's quite slow, it maybe is quite bureaucratic, whereas by getting content creators to do it, it's one way of monetizing for content creators, but it also means there's quite original content there, right? So that's like an interesting company. I'm also listed my courses on there too. Then on the Lab podcast last week, we had Vishal Varani. So Vishal is the head of UK Health at YouTube. His lab was about how to grow on YouTube as an expert. Because a lot of people talk about how to grow on YouTube, but it's usually like you have to do dance videos or you have to do something silly. Whereas this is about, okay, when what he does is helps doctors, in particular medical professionals, to grow on the platform. So it was a very interesting way of looking at things of if you're an authority, how do you use YouTube to grow in that space? So definitely recommend that episode, especially if you think about becoming a content creator or using content to grow your business. That's a definite episode you should check out. Then this morning, we released Farah Chowdhury, who's at Dow Jones and is the head of EMA partnerships. So hers is all about how to expand into Africa through partnerships. And she's somebody who was born and raised in Africa. She's worked in over like most of the countries in the continent about how to enter these different markets because it can be very difficult, right? It's a different market to the UK. And being able to understand the local culture and the ways of working is really important in order to be able to succeed there. And Africa is always considered like the market which is going to explode sooner or later, right? So you've seen India grow massively, you've seen China grow massively, you've seen some of these other countries have that explosion of growth, and Africa is on that cusp at the moment. So if you can be a market leader in Africa, and let's say Nigeria, where the economy is going to be growing massively in the next 10, 20, 30 years, if you can get early and establish a brand, there's so much growth potential. Whereas, say, in other markets which are more mature, they can be quite saturated. So that's a really interesting episode there for anybody looking to potentially enter the African market. So those are the episodes from this week. I believe on Friday, I think it's going to be Alston Zelcher, who's a partner at 8 Roads. So again, like, he was a great interviewee. He founded Payleven, which merged with SumUp. So I always use SumUp. I don't know about you guys. So it probably shows how much I eat. But when you go to the market, for example, when you're paying for something, usually it's SumUp that does that. That creates that thing that you use the contactless on, right? So he was like one of the pioneers in that area, and then merged, and then now he invests in different fintech companies. So it's got a really interesting background. He was also raised in Hong Kong, and then came across, and when he was in his like early teens, and he talked about his experience of being a majority in his country, but then coming here and being somebody who stood out as different, and people asking him questions out of ignorance, that he was then able to use as a motivation to really thrive and stand out. A very interesting story, and really honored to have him on the podcast. This week, I've got a few recordings. So who have I got this week? Can I find it? Let's see. If I look at my diary. So this week I'm interviewing Tim Chong, who's the founder of Yonder, Taran Gidumal, who has done many things, and part one of those is growing a company to 3 billion in revenue. I'm also interviewing Tim Chong again for Entrepreneur's Handbook. So here's my interviews this week. And I've got events with like Amazon, with Microsoft, and like a few different venture capitalists as well. So as I said, the big event is on Wednesday, which hopefully you will all attend, which is at Barclays Rise. So whether you're a founder, whether you're an investor, whether you're curious about learning more, it's a great place to be, and a great place to meet lots of other people who share the same values and ambitions that you do. So make sure you head across to that. So I'm just trying to keep an eye on all my different emails as I'm going along. How many people have we got signed up now to our Wednesday event? 86. Okay, cool. So let's see. I have so many emails. It's quite frustrating because there's a few things that we want to announce soon, but I'm not going to announce them until the contracts are signed, because I've made that mistake in the past. And big things are coming, but okay, here's another thing I want to talk about too. So the end of this year, so episode 100 for the Bay HQ will be on the 15th of December. And what we're going to do is then not release any more episodes until 2024. And the idea being is that because we do that, it enables us to kind of take that reset and think again, and like make sure that we get everything in order. Because one of the things about growing as fast as we have is there's so much going on, but all that stuff going on can sometimes become messy. And as we want to scale, we want everything that we've done so far to become clean, everything we've done so far to be really systematized, get the assistants to take over more, get the people who got working with us to help out more, so that we can launch new things. So one of the things that's coming up tomorrow will be the Baywatch. So Baywatch will be looking at people who are less than $1 million in funding or less than 5 million in revenue, and kind of highlighting them and showing them, like, here's the next generation of companies. And hopefully that audience and people like you will get behind and like support them, right? And we've got the ambassador program, which we announced a while ago, but it's just taking a bit of time to really get that off the ground and making sure that we have it all airtight. So once that is launched as well, that's another thing that's happening. So those are the two things we're probably going to launch this year. And next year, there'll be so much more going on, because next year we'll have that funding behind us. And once that funding is behind us, there's just like everything expands quickly there, right? Another big thing to remember is that if you go to our newsletter, so if you haven't signed up to a newsletter, you should be signed up to our newsletter. So let me just put that up there. So this will be www.thebayhq.com/join. So what we can do there is, with the newsletter everybody joining, the more we have behind us, the bigger and better we can do events, right? So that HPC event was 120 people. This one so far has 86, but obviously a lot of people sign up last minute. So if we get similar kind of numbers again. But really exciting to see what's happening there. And next year we can do more events and we can have different people hosting the events, right? It doesn't have to be me. And this is one of the things we're working on, is like that separation of different parts of the business and what we're doing, so we can expand, and it doesn't need to be dependent on me, or because the Bay HQ isn't just me, right? And I'm really at pains to emphasize that there's so much more. And as we scale, it can't just be about me. And the idea is in a couple of years' time, because I said we're going this is the long term, right? This isn't going to be something which we just do for a little bit and then we quit. In the longer term, it can be somebody else hosting this podcast. It can be other people here. And what you'll see in the future is that the ambassadors might join me on this call in the morning, and then you can chat to them too, and you can ask them questions as well. And what we'll probably do is I'll probably post this on LinkedIn as well, because at the moment it's only on YouTube, which is good for us, because what we like to do with this is these rack up the watch time and helps us to meet those targets on YouTube. But if we do it on LinkedIn, we can also get another audience there. So lots happening there. And yeah, so we've still got 28 minutes to go. So if anybody's got any questions, let me know. Otherwise, what I'm going to do is I flick through the news and see if there's anything interesting that I can chat about. Okay, let's see. Newsletter. So what's been happening? I don't believe any British Asian founders raised any capital this week, but I can just check that very quickly. So I can see Selex. Who are the founders? No, nothing in there. If I go to Chirag Modi. So there's a few different news as well that we follow in order to keep up on top of the news. So one is European Tech Weekly by Chirag Modi. Sifted newsletter is another great one. And then you've got Tech Funding News as well. They offer some good information. Let's have a look. Who have we got here? Canna Labs. Who runs Canna Labs? And Huel. So Huel has raised 100 million. So they're doing well. So let's see. Canna Labs founders. Oh, so we do have a British Asian who has raised capital. So we have Kartik Subranan, who I'm just checking out now. So this is the founder of Kana Labs, but is based in India. But according to Europe Tech Weekly, this is a company based in the UK. So let's do some research on that. And this is also one of the things that maybe some of you don't see about how some of this stuff works, is that what I'm doing is I'm researching things live. So I'm checking out what's going on with different things, how's everything happening. And off the back of that, I'm able to progress. So Kana Labs. So it's interesting. So he's based in Tamil Nadu, but the company's based in London. But they've just raised their seed round. So congratulations to them. So I don't know too much about his company, so I'm going to check them out a bit more. But it's Web Pre Simplified. So that's a British Asian founder who just raised some capital. Interesting. Okay, let's see. Remember, if you're watching, feel free to ask any questions. I'm happy to answer. So the reason why this one was delayed is basically my phone stopped working. So because of that, I had to try and mess about with things in the morning, and in the end, I've just decided to use the poor camera, like you can see here, rather than my usual high quality one. So I'm getting a new iPhone that I've ordered now. But I was delaying it because as a startup, money's tight and I have to be careful with that kind of stuff. I can't just be spending loads of money on new equipment. So that's why I maybe held on a bit too long before getting a new one. So what am I looking for? Another interesting thing that happened last week, I believe, is A16Z. So A16Z is Andreessen Horowitz. And if you ever wonder why they're called A16Z, it's because there are 16 letters between the A in Andreessen and the Z in Horowitz. So whenever people talk about A16Z, that's what they mean. It's just a long name. So the shorthand is A16Z. And I've checked that out for you why that's the case. Why name? Let's see. So it's a shorthand that's used in a few. I can't remember where it came from. So it's been used in computer science quite a bit. So internationalization is I18N, and localization is L10N. So the reason behind A16Z being called A16Z is basically just an inside software engineer joke. But Andreessen Horowitz, A16Z, are one of the biggest investors in the world, and they've did a launch party last week in London. So what that means is that for founders in the UK, that's a new potential source of funding, which is quite a big one. So I'm connected to them in some ways. So I'm trying to get a bit more, foster that relationship more, because obviously the more relationships I have with these different venture capitalists, the more relationships that the Bay HQ has, the more we can try and help you guys, right, the listeners, to get in touch with these people when you're trying to raise capital. And we've done pretty well on that front. So we're connected with people at Balderton Capital, with Hoxton Ventures, with Concept Ventures, with Local Globe, with Octopus Ventures. So there's all these different like major venture capital organizations that we're now connected with, Highland Ventures. So what we do from this is that if we know these people in a way that's more casual, it means that when you come to us and try to raise funding, we can make those introductions in a bit of a warmer way. And we're still going to have a high standard because we don't want to damage those relationships, right? So if you come to us an idea or a deck that's not really ready, we're going to give you that feedback to then help you to have the best chance. If we just pass you on, we're just setting you up for failure, right? So that's not good for anybody. We're wasting their time, we're wasting your time, wasting our time. So we try to be very conscious about those connections we make and making sure we give them the best chance for success. But that's something to bear in mind at some of these big organizations. So yeah, that's something we should just keep an eye on that and the different investors we know, because then that's a way that you can use what we're doing here to help your company to succeed. Okay, any questions? Once Gerv is back from holiday, I'll have him joining these as well. So then it's not just me doing a monologue in the meantime. But let's see, who have we got? Newsletter just come in. Partner Labs. So somebody's just submitted their pitch deck here. Nice. So we've got, that's cool. So yeah, one of the things I guess at the moment I can quite actively say some of the people helping getting to investment. One is a company called Now to Vow. So they are a wedding platform that's looking at connecting suppliers and people in the industry and customers. There's a company called Tutor Hive. Oh, so Tutor Hive I actually forgot to put in the newsletter. So that's my bad. I just realized. So Rushab, if you're listening, I'm sorry. So Tutor Hive are a company which, like, let me get their deck open for you. So it's a way to find a trusted and inspiring private tutor, and it basically matches people on different methods, and that's a way to really get people to find the right tutor for them. So I was meant to add that to the newsletter and I didn't, so I am sorry. Whoops. That can go. So that's a couple of the ideas there. There's different companies. So we've got a good 25 or 30. So if you're also listening to this, you're an investor, we have a lot of different companies and pitch decks that we get in that we're happy to provide as well. So that's one of the things which is a service we offer where we can help investors to diversify their funnels. One of the other things I worked on the other day too is it's really hard to categorize companies because they fit into so many different ways. So what we used is Seedrs, and we used it was PitchBook and Gix to come up with our own categories of different types of companies. So that it's easier for people in the Browsing Girl website to find the right thing for them. So if I look up that at the moment, so if I look at the categories here, so we've got like ag tech, AI, B2B software, blockchain, capital goods, commercial and professional services, communication, consumer and retail, data, ed tech, and so on. Because basically what you find is that different investors will have specific areas they look into, right? So the better we can categorize people, the more likely we are to be able to find the right investors for them. That's something which we're doing quite consciously. How do we make sure that as we get a bigger and bigger network, that we're able to connect the right people with each other? And part of that is about putting people into different buckets in order to work out, okay, you're in this bucket, here's some other people in this bucket, go and chat, go and make friends. And that's why this first event is about fintech, because fintech is one of the leading areas in the UK. So we've got the people in the panel, so that's Matt Ong, Nitya Gupta, and Nina Mahanti. But we've also interviewed other people such as Sesh Sarkar, Alston Zelcher. There's a lot of people who've done very well in the financial space. And that's a particular area that I think a lot of people are going to be trying to create startups in the future. So that's why we focus on that one first. So I'm just seeing if I've got a message come through. Where did that go? Okay, so we've got Ravi. Okay, so I'm now just looking through my millions of emails. But yeah, as I said, any questions, anybody, feel free to ask. There are no stupid questions. Somebody last week asked me if I'm single or not, so take it what you want. I might not necessarily answer if it's personal, but you can ask. So I've also ordered a new hoodie, a Bay HQ hoodie, so that I'm not wearing my fluffy nightgown in these calls anymore. Some people might call that unprofessional, but professionalism is overrated. When is it coming? Oh, they're still picking it. Estimated delivery is 8th to the 13th. Okay. So with the merchandise I get as well, I get it from Printful. And Printful is good, I think, if you're using small volume. If you're going to do a batch order, but then you have to keep it yourself, then there's other services like Banana Moon, for example. Let me just see. I've got a message from Hugh. I'm just having to do a quick introduction, which I forgot to do. Is joining. So one of the challenges I have is sheer amount of communication, and I'm trying to set better boundaries as well. So maybe that's something I could talk about now too. So I'm now trying to reply to, well, at the weekend, especially Sunday, no business messages. And is one of the big challenges is with people who are, say, side hustlers, and we mentioned Jay earlier about doing something in the 9 to 5, is that they only have the weekends and the evenings to really do their work on the business, which is the time when I want to be switching off as a full-time person. And it's really trying to manage that is quite difficult because I want to pay it forward. I want to be accessible. But at the same time, if I'm working all day and in the evenings, then I'm never really looking after myself. So that's something which is quite interesting. And it's a challenge a lot of the time of like, okay, how do I find that right balance? And one of the things I think as well is like at the end of the day, like a lot of stuff isn't so urgent that I need to reply straight away. So if somebody messages me on Sunday, I'll reply on Monday. And that's okay because I need to be able to just go out and have life too. Because if I don't do that, what's going to happen is I'll burn out, I'll be cranky, I'll get agitated, and me being aggy doesn't help anybody. And I think taking that time to just be a bit more kind to myself about that is really important. Because even today, I'm going to have to like I've already probably talked to 40 people today, so that's just by 1 o'clock, right? So this is the kind of nature of the work I do, right? It's incredible amount of talking to lots of different people on WhatsApp in particular. So it's like, how do I balance that? So, for example, my LinkedIn notifications are now off on my phone. So only time, so I have to go to my I have to check LinkedIn consciously in order to see the messages there, because what I was finding it's just always pinging my phone and it just gives me that anxiety, right? So if I can put these different barriers in to try and separate myself out to give myself more freedom, then that's really important. And it's trying to be a bit more practicing what I preach, right? Is I will tell other founders to not work the way I've been doing. So if I'm telling other people to make sure they put in boundaries, I need to put in boundary myself. And it's always more difficult because you always think it's following your own advice is always very difficult, but it's really important to be able to do that. So let's see. Absolute pleasure. So if anybody had any questions, make sure you ask in the comments. We've got another 7 or 8 minutes to go, or even 9 minutes. Quick maths. So I'm now looking at my email list, and I've got 25 emails this morning to look through. Okay, that can go. So it just categorize things. Let's see. This is going to go to newsletter. Okay, newsletter. Yeah, so one of the things I tend to get quite a lot of is like requests for coffee, and it's just working out how I can fit that into my week. It's always a challenge. This we've got a couple of exciting. So obviously, our event, which you're all coming to on Wednesday evening at Barclays Rise, but then we also have. So I'm going to an AWS Startup Women's Demo Day on Wednesday morning, which would be really good. I think you can sign up for that online as well. Then I've got a couple of founder dinners as well, meeting with people from Microsoft, and then a couple of venture capital firms as well. So this week is fairly busy. On Saturday, I'm going to the Bali event at Soho House. And then next week is also mental. Next week, I'm giving a talk at Bath University, which will be good fun as well. Because one of the things that's really important to us is making an impact for students. So I'm really happy that that's now being set up and in play. And next week, I'm also interviewing Avnish Goyal and Radha Vyas. So Avnish Goyal is of Hallmark Care Homes, and Radha Vyas is of Flashback. So they're two really exciting interviews that are next week as well. So I'm looking forward as we get closer towards. Oh God, what's this? Future Tech Talks AI for Good. There's so many. Like my calendar is already quite full for later on in this year. Lots of incredible female founders and female leaders as well coming on the podcast soon, which I'm really excited about. So another one is Anita Murthy, Sumya Singh, Ines Duve, Raj Kara. So let me just put this in the diary. And then it's going to be winter very quickly and Christmas time. Nice. I'm just blocking off that Christmas week now so nobody puts in any meetings. Sorted. Okay, 5 more minutes. Any questions? Any questions? This is also quite a creepy experience for me because I'm just sitting here talking away while I know people are watching, but I don't know who's watching or what they're thinking or what they're doing. So that's interesting. Let's see. I'm also creeping up to 3,400 people on LinkedIn. I must admit, I keep checking how many followers I have. I can't help it. But I can see I've got a bunch through this morning. A lot of people to do the medical field, and that's from Vishal, I think, posting. One of the things I'm going to do today is get a bunch of the Entrepreneur's Handbook podcast stuff sorted out, because that then frees me up for more Bay HQ stuff. So if you haven't noticed by now, Bay HQ is my main priority. And what I'm trying to do is juggle some of the other things and like sunset some of them to give myself that time where I can focus on Bay HQ and having a life too, because it's nice to have a life sometimes. One of the things that might be quite interesting for you guys to see, but I can, let me hide my messages first. Share screen, entire screen, this one. So for example, you can see here my LinkedIn. So you can see I clear my, but you can see the kind of audience we have, right? So my audience in particular is like, not like heavily founders, co-founders, CEOs, and managing directors. So if I did the maths quickly here, well, I don't know myself do the maths there. So that's 10.2, 19.9, and then 19.9. So just over 21% of my followers on LinkedIn are either founders, co-founders, CEOs, or managing directors. And that's the target audience of what we're doing here, right? So we're trying to help those target demographics. So as you can see, it varies throughout the week. Like I've actually been quite quiet in the last week, so it's kind of normal. Generally, Saturday and Sunday, I don't think are good days for LinkedIn. But you can just see that kind of general drift here. So you can also probably see, I'm guessing you'll see a slowdown of the week I was on holiday. So yeah, you can see this is the week I was on holiday where it all kind of went down a lot. But you can see that kind of consistent growth. And then if you look further back, you can see these big spikes of different things that are going on. But I've grown 25% in the last 90 days. My idea is by probably, let's say, June next year, I want to be on 10,000 minimum, which I think is probably quite likely because as you can see, so this has actually been a bit of a slower period. Usually it's about 3% per week. When it's 3% per week, that compounds, and obviously 3% per week when you've got 10,000 followers or 9,000 followers is significantly more than when you've got 3,000. So that's just a little bit peek behind the scenes of LinkedIn. The other thing I do in terms of analytics is I have different competitors on the Bay HQ account to look at how we're competing, how we're doing there. So I'm not going to show that because then I'm showing who we're competing with. And it's not necessarily competing, it's just people in a similar kind of space. But that's a really good way to learn about things too. So I've got 1 minute left. So I'm going to wrap up here. So thank you everybody for listening, and make sure you join the Us on Wednesday, where you can meet some incredible founders and investors. So take care.